Imagine this. You're a German soldier, captured somewhere in North Africa or France during the chaos of World War II. After weeks of transport, hunger, and confusion, you finally arrive at an American POW camp, thousands of miles from home. You expect hostility, you expect punishment. But instead, the guards smile at you. One of them looks you in the eye and says, in perfect fluent German, "Willkommen in America, Kamerad." Welcome to America, comrade. In that moment, your entire world flips upside down. Because how could the enemy, the Americans, speak your mother tongue better than some of your own officers? The story begins in 1943, deep in the deserts of Tunisia. The German Afrika Korps, once proud and undefeated under Rommel's command, is collapsing. Supply lines are destroyed, morale is broken, and thousands of German and Italian soldiers are surrendering to the Allied forces. Among them was Sergeant Otto Meyer, a 26-year-old radio operator from Hamburg. He had joined the Wehrmacht in 1940, full of national pride and belief in the invincibility of the German army. But by May 1943, his reality had shattered. After a fierce skirmish near Bizerte, Otto and his squad were surrounded by American troops. Outnumbered, exhausted, and with no ammunition left, they raised their hands in surrender. The Americans didn't cheer. They simply disarmed them, offered water, and told them to line up. Otto remembered feeling humiliated, not because of the capture, but because of what he saw in the eyes of the Americans. No hatred, just curiosity. For years, Nazi propaganda had painted Americans as chaotic, undisciplined mongrels, weak men from a nation of consumers, not warriors. Yet the men standing before Otto looked strong, calm, and confident. As the prisoners were marched toward the coast, Otto overheard one American soldier whisper to another, "Don't let him fool you. Some of these Germans are smart as hell." Otto didn't understand the words, but he caught the tone. It wasn't mockery, it was respect. A week later, the captured men were loaded onto ships. Rumors spread among the prisoners. "They're sending us to England." Others claimed, "No, we're going to the U.S." To America, it sounded like a myth. None of them believed it until weeks later, they stepped off a train and saw the stars and stripes waving in the wind. Arrival in America. It was Camp Ruston, Louisiana, one of the largest POW camps in the United States. Thousands of German prisoners would eventually pass through its gates. The camp looked nothing like what Otto had imagined. There were no barbed wire cages, no torture, no humiliation. Instead, there were wooden barracks, clean beds, a kitchen, even a small theater. The Americans called it rehabilitation. The Germans called it bewildering. As the prisoners were processed, each was given an identification tag, new clothes, and instructions in broken German. The guards tried to communicate, but their accents. During roll call, a new American officer stepped forward. A tall man with sharp blue eyes and a calm expression. He looked at Otto's group and said in flawless native German, "Meine Herren, Sie sind jetzt Gefangene der Vereinigten Staaten von Amerika. Sie werden respektvoll behandelt, solange Sie sich respektvoll verhalten. Gentlemen, you are now prisoners of the United States of America. You will be treated with respect, as long as you behave with respect." The entire line of German POWs froze. Some thought they were hallucinating. Others laughed nervously. Otto couldn't believe what he was hearing. Not a trace of an accent. Not a hint of foreign rhythm. The man spoke like someone raised in Munich or Berlin. He finally asked, "Sind Sie Deutsche? Are you German?" The officer smiled. "No," he replied. "American, born in Chicago, but my parents were from Dresden." From that moment, the camp no longer felt like a foreign land. It felt like some kind of mirror world, a place where enemies could suddenly sound like friends. The German soldiers couldn't stop talking about it that night. How could the Americans have so many fluent German speakers? Were they spies, immigrants, or something darker? Had they infiltrated Germany before the war? For Otto and many others, this question became an obsession, because deep down they realized something terrifying. If the Americans could speak like Germans, think like Germans, maybe they understood Germany far better than Germany understood them. The morning sun rose softly over Camp Ruston, spreading golden light across the pine trees of Louisiana. The air smelled of wet soil and coffee. Yes, real coffee, drifting from the mess hall where American soldiers chatted casually before roll call. Behind the fences, hundreds of German POWs were already awake, standing in neat lines waiting for orders. Among them was Sergeant Otto Meyer, who still couldn't get the words of that American officer out of his head. Sie werden respektvoll behandelt. You will be treated with respect. It was strange, almost unnerving, to be treated like a human again. The camp didn't feel like punishment. It felt like observation. Every move, every reaction of the Germans was being quietly watched. Otto noticed that the Americans were organized with almost German precision. The guards were polite, disciplined, and eerily calm. They smiled often, but their eyes were sharp, always studying. At first, Otto assumed this politeness was just a trick. Maybe the Americans were trying to break their morale through kindness instead of fear. But as days turned into weeks, that theory began to crumble. Each day followed a strict routine. The prisoners woke up at dawn, had breakfast, oatmeal, bread, sometimes even sausages, and were then assigned tasks: cleaning, cooking, repairing equipment, or working on nearby farms. To Otto's shock, they were paid small wages for their labor. He earned 80 cents a day, enough to buy soap, cigarettes, and occasionally a chocolate bar from the camp store. It felt surreal. Back in Germany, propaganda had described American camps as hellholes where German soldiers were starved or tortured, but here Otto was healthier than he'd been in months. Still, one thing gnawed at him: the language. The Americans' German wasn't just fluent, it was authentic. Different guards spoke with different accents, some Bavarian, some Saxon, others even used slang that only locals from Hamburg would know. How could this be possible? One afternoon, while repairing a fence, Otto overheard two guards talking behind him, in German again, but this time not to impress anyone. They were joking about baseball and the Louisiana heat. He couldn't resist. Otto turned and asked, "Where did you learn to speak like that?" One of the guards laughed. "College," he said. "University of Wisconsin. Half my classmates were from German families." The other added, "America's full of Germans, friend. You'd be surprised." That night, Otto lay awake thinking. He hadn't realized until then how many Germans had migrated to America before the war. Millions of them. Building farms, towns, and even whole communities where German was still spoken at home. It dawned on him that the Americans had a hidden advantage. They didn't just fight Germans, they understood them. What Otto didn't know was that this understanding wasn't an accident. In Washington, the U.S. military intelligence division had quietly launched a program called Operation German Voice. It recruited bilingual Americans, often second-generation immigrants, to work as interpreters, interrogators, and guards in POW camps. These men were trained not just in translation, but in psychological manipulation. Their mission was simple: use language as a weapon, not to threaten, but to disarm. The German POWs began to realize that every aspect of their camp was designed not just for containment, but for influence. The guards who spoke fluent German weren't just translators. They were students of behavior. They took notes on which prisoners were loyal, Nazis, and which were just soldiers trying to survive. One day, Otto's friend, Fritz Weber, pointed to a guard chatting with some prisoners by the fence. "See him?" he whispered. "That one speaks like he's from Stuttgart." I asked. "He says his parents were. But he's American-born. They're using our own language to read our thoughts." Otto didn't reply. He knew Fritz was right. The more the guards spoke German, the more comfortable the prisoners became, and the more they talked. It was brilliant and terrifying. Winter settled over Camp Ruston. The pine trees stood still in the cold Louisiana wind, and frost coated the wire fences like a thin layer of silver. The war in Europe was reaching its breaking point, though the prisoners only heard fragments: rumors from guards, whispers from new arrivals, and carefully filtered radio news. By now, Otto Meyer had been a prisoner for nearly a year. The camp had become its own strange little world, a piece of Germany inside America. Some POWs formed choirs, others played soccer matches against the guards. They built model villages, ran newspapers, even held small classes on philosophy and engineering. But beneath that calm surface, something else was happening. Something invisible, yet powerful. The Americans were playing a psychological game. They didn't threaten the Germans. They didn't torture them. They befriended them, and through that friendship, they learned everything. The Americans had achieved something extraordinary: the mirror effect. By speaking fluent German and understanding every cultural nuance, they held up a mirror to the POWs. They showed them who they were, what they had become, and what they could be instead. When the guards discussed music, they quoted Beethoven and Bach. When they debated politics, they cited Kant and Goethe. German thinkers, German ideals, but twisted toward freedom, not control. One guard even told Otto, "You Germans gave the world its greatest minds. But now you let a madman tell you what to think." Those words cut deep, because Otto knew he couldn't argue with them. As 1945 began, the war was collapsing faster than anyone had expected. The Allies were crossing the Rhine, Hitler was hiding in his bunker, and the POW camps in America were filled with men who no longer knew what, or who, they believed in. Otto had changed. He could feel it. The man who had once marched proudly under the swastika now hesitated even to draw it on a piece of paper. He no longer dreamed of medals or victory, only of home, peace, and forgiveness. But the past wasn't done with him yet. One morning, Otto was summoned to the administration office. Waiting for him was the camp officer, the same fluent German speaker from months ago, whose name Otto now knew as Captain Henry Adler. Adler handed him an envelope. "From Switzerland," he said. "It's about your family." Otto's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a short letter from the Red Cross. His parents were alive, but his younger brother, a 17-year-old soldier on the Eastern Front, had been killed in action near Warsaw. Otto didn't cry. He couldn't. His mind went blank, his heart heavy with something beyond grief, regret. All those speeches about honor and destiny. And for what? A grave somewhere in the snow. Captain Adler sat quietly across from him, then spoke softly in German. "You can't bring him back, Otto, but you can decide what kind of man you'll be when you go home." For the first time, Otto understood what the Americans were truly fighting for. Not revenge, not power, but the idea that even enemies could change. When the war finally ended in May 1945, the camp erupted with mixed emotions: relief, fear, disbelief. Some prisoners cheered quietly. Others wept, knowing that their homeland was in ruins. The next weeks were filled with confusion. Many POWs were slowly released or transferred back to Europe. Before Otto left, Captain Adler found him one last time. He handed him a small envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a simple message in German. "Die Wahrheit ist das Einzige, das den Krieg überlebt." The truth is the only thing that survives war. Otto stared at the words for a long time. Then he saluted the man, not as an officer, but as a friend. The story of the German POWs who couldn't believe U.S. guards spoke fluent. German isn't just about war. It's about understanding. How knowing your enemy's language can turn enemies into people and people into teachers. The Americans didn't break the German spirit through violence. They broke it by showing compassion in a language the Germans could not ignore. And that perhaps was the most powerful weapon of all. Words can build empires, Otto once said, but the right words can end wars.